In this video I cover a few things. I will talk about Airbus and Boeing, about the market in general, smaller and larger aircraft, and A380 freight conversions possibilities, NMA possibilities, 737 and A320 replacement, what may happen. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Like, subscribe and share. Hi! It's been a while since I recorded a video on this channel. I have been very busy on my other channel, the personal development one, with 2 new shows appearing aside from my daily gratitude journal, which I record every other day, not daily, but I cover every time I cover 2 days. And I've been seeing some news coming in, and I felt now like the moment is right. So we all know that there is this whole COVID-19 disaster going on, and whether you believe it's true or it's half true or it's whatever, it's irrelevant. Fact is, the industry, just like most other industries, not all, but most other industries, got a real hard hit, and it's not over yet. So the manufacturers are not earning money, or are earning very little money, because there are almost no deliveries. Airbus was the one still earning the most, because they didn't have any aircraft grounded, so they were still delivering and still getting paid. But now they also start to have problems with the undeliverable aircraft, which are starting to ramp up. Just like Boeing had that problem with the 737, now Airbus starts to have less and less space. And it's not just about space, but it's also about these aircraft need to be kept in shape, which means maintenance. Even long-term storage means certain kinds of maintenance. And these are expensive, and you need to know for how long you're going to store, because the difference between short-term and long-term maintenance is quite important. So you cannot just shift from one to the other. But if it's really going to be long-term, you definitely want to do the long-term storage, because then it's going to be cheaper. But you need to know where is that breaking point when one becomes cheaper than the other. And even then you still have to do certain things. Of course, at the start with the long-term maintenance, there's a lot to do, of the long-term storage, sorry. And then there's stuff you still need to do every month or so, or every week. There are a few things you need to do. And then, at the end of that, there's a lot to do again to get it back into flyable shape. And the short-term storage means constant. Every few days you need to do certain things. So the bigger airlines, like KLM for example, they have part of the fleet in long-term storage, and part of them they put in short-term storage, especially the smaller aircraft, 737s. They're the most likely to be used the most and the earliest. So these are the ones they mainly put in short-term storage, and they're flying again a little bit more now. And then from the large ones, they put most of them in long-term storage, and a few of them are flying now. Going back to the manufacturers, Boeing had already the grounding of the 737, stopped the production at a certain moment because they had no space left. They needed special approval for special flights to bring their aircraft to another airfield where they could store them somewhere in the desert, where there was enough space and very dry air to prevent moisture and oxidation from happening, or maybe not fully prevent, but at least reduce the chance, slow it down, and make maintenance easier. But they now also have the inability to deliver the other aircraft. To the military, yeah, they just keep going. They don't have the COVID problem apparently. It only affects the civilian people, not the military. So interesting, right? So the 787 was affected. 777s, I don't know if they fully stopped already the production, but they were very close to delivering the last ones. And then the 777X program has simply been put on hold, which could be seen as a benefit because they still had things to fine-tune, so now they have more time to really think things through. And when the market picks up again and airlines are willing to take on such a large aircraft, because basically is taking on a 747 but then with 2 engines, looking at the capacity, especially because they started with a 900, the 8, no, it's not the 900, the 9, the 8 is like the 777-300, which was the most popular, but the 9 was even larger. So yeah, when nobody's flying or only a few people are flying, you're more likely to use a 787 or even a A321 XLR, which can do the long distance but with a smaller number of people and have much better economics. So the 777X9 basically came too late. Some say came too early, but I believe came too late because these huge aircraft, we won't need them anymore in the future. I mean, there's a reason why the A380 already had a very limited lifespan, and that lifespan is only getting shorter now because the hubs and spoke system is just dying, especially now with the smaller numbers of people. Okay, it may revive in certain cases. It will still be cheaper to gather the people together and then have one aircraft that can make that long jump to the other side of the globe. So maybe it will work for a moment, but after that we'll get back to point. That's why the 787 was a success. That's why the A350 was a success, even though it came much later. Even the A330neo became a success, started being sold. Not because it's better than the 787, but because it's cheaper to purchase. And for those who already had the A330 or had second-hand A330s, it was easier to just make the transition to a similar type rating aircraft. There would be no costs. And talking about similar type rating aircraft, we come of course to the 737 MAX. Some may say, oh, COVID was a blessing because now Boeing can hide like, the crisis, Corona, oh. Yeah, you have more time to fix your shit. And when I say fixing your shit, I'm talking about really fixing things, because even the electrical wiring in the back of the aircraft has to be fixed. The FAA is not taking any chances anymore. On top of that, EASA, the European Safety Agency, will allow for only 1 year temporarily certification before it's mandatory to have a third sensor for MCAS, speed sensor. It may be a synthetic. I do not know exactly the technical thing about synthetic, but synthetic sounds like it's more software based than physical measuring system, like these things you see that come out, like antennas that come out forward. But there want a third sensor to be installed, which is not so strange because many systems have 2 backups, not just 1 backup, 2 backups. And in this case, due to the the high risk on a fatal accident if the system MCAS fails. They put it in such a category that two backups are required, where for less critical systems one backup is sufficient. But every system has a backup anyway, but then for the very critical ones there's a second backup. And so Boeing has a challenge. Boeing really needs to work even harder to get this done, and Europeans going this way could mean, especially with the wonderful trade war that the US started, that China will follow Europe. And then the question is, what will Russia do? Because Russia is also being embargoed, and we don't know what other countries will do, like Brazil, Argentina, African countries. I can imagine that, I forgot which country the aircraft was from, the one that's crashed in Africa, but I can imagine that they also will say, we follow Europe as well. One crashing and killing so many people is enough. And was it Malaysia where the Lion Air dropped? They may say the same, like, we prefer a third one too. We want to be safe. So we will see a lot happening in the coming 6 months. And when I mean a lot, I don't mean a lot of deliveries. I don't mean a lot of orders. We may see more cancellations. And Boeing really got a real hit because they dropped, if I'm correct, below the 5,000 now. And there's almost 1,000 order difference between the Airbus A320neo family and the 737 MAX family. And this is not the first time that Airbus has sold more A320s than Boeing 737s at a certain moment. But 1,000 is really becoming a big number. It's really Airbus taking firmly the lead. Airbus also has had cancellations, but not as many. So we can really see that Airbus is overtaking Boeing when it comes to the civilian market. Because in the end, the 737, the A320 family are the bulk that's being sold and are also the bulk that is flying. So this also means when it comes to spare parts, which is a big chunk of revenue, that's why they can give so much discount on the aircraft. They just want to sell the aircraft. They're even willing to buy back all the aircraft, even from another manufacturer, I mean, that are not built by themselves. They will buy it back just so that companies start flying their aircraft, and then they'll make money in the coming 20 years on all the spare parts. And so this is where Airbus is really going to take the lead now. And we have seen that 787 orders, I mean, they're not coming in that much anymore already for a while. They are at the limit already. They built the thing, they sold very well, they delivered, and now it's dying off unless they're gonna come with an upgrade. But it's most probably too early for that. The technology hasn't advanced that much to really do an upgrade. And especially now, there is no market to sell it to. The aircraft is still too young. Even those who started the first is still too young. So there's nothing to sell there. So it's 737 MAX family, then 787, which is much bigger, and then 777X, which is even bigger, which I already said we can forget about those. And there's nothing in between, where Airbus has the direct competitor of the 737. They have the smaller one, then the 737-700 even, which is the A220. And then they have the sweet spot in the market now, which is the A321neo XLR, which competes with the 757 that Boeing didn't manage to build a replacement for. Middle of the market is not covered by Boeing, where Airbus has the A321neo and the A330-800, which is like a 767. It is a little bit big, but it's good enough. The A321neo XLR really crushed Boeing there, because it's a direct replacement for the 757 with a longer range and a larger capacity. And I'm talking the 757-200, which was the one with the longest range, which was the most sold of the variant. So the 300, yes, is bigger, but was not really being sold. It was too close to the 767-200. So the coming few years will be really interesting. Boeing already cancelled the NMA. They said they would go back to the drawing table, and I already discussed this before, where I said that they may come up with a new design that will, especially now with the deal with Embraer being broken up, they don't have that segment, so there is a chance Boeing will do what actually I said they will do, which is building an aircraft that will compete with the A220 and the Embraer E-jets, and take the first chunk of the 737s. So let's say A220 to A320. So that is, let's say, the Embraer until the 737 MAX 8 or the 737-800, and then for the middle of the market they will build another aircraft which will be like the 737-900, 737 MAX 9 upwards, to cover until relatively close to the 787. So they will build two new aircraft, and maybe they'll do it just like they did back in the 80s and 70s, early 80s, when they built the 757 and the 767 and had a lot of commonality between the two. They may repeat that. And Airbus's response will be most probably to just build a new replacement for the A320 family and continue with the A220 and have that one extended, like the 500 version, which Air France was already requesting, and they will basically do the same. So mind my words, I've been right about a few things that I predicted already. Already when I was in my teens, I did design certain aircraft, and actually I designed the 777X9, its capacity, I predicted it. And because the engine's capacity back then was limited, it was before the 777 was actually no, it was, I think, in theory launched more or less, but it was not flying at all yet. But I then designed it with like two engines brought to each other with a double combustion chamber or something like that, because there was a problem with the size of the engines when it came to diameter, so I just made it like bring two together and have them combine something, which was technically really complicated. And I'm happy that they just managed to build bigger engines. But when it came to the capacity, it was technically a two-engine aircraft, two aisles, and a huge capacity and really long within the 80 meters block, because I already knew that it was needed. So they did that. And but also my predictions about the 737 MAX grounding, how long it would take, and people were mad at me and it was bullshit, and well, I didn't say it out loud, but I was thinking about it may hit 2 years. I mean, from the start I said out loud 1 year, but I felt like 2 years, closer to 2 years. And on paper the grounding may be lifted in autumn, but that doesn't mean they're flying. Because once the grounding is lifted on paper, it means on paper we know what is needed. And then that needs to be done so they can actually start flying. So they're already talking about spring before they really start flying, and that is just in the US. We don't know how it's going to be outside the US. If they get a dispensation for 1 year to fly with only 2 sensors, basically it's saying, okay, you're allowed to crash the first year, but after 1 year you're not allowed to crash anymore. I mean, it's not really being consistent if you say that it wouldn't give you dispense. I mean, we'll allow you for 1 year to just fly around unsafely. That doesn't make any sense at all. So it's either you need 3 sensors, you need a double backup because it's that level of critical instrument, or not. And when it comes to production ramp up, Boeing is predicting to deliver 450 aircraft in 450 737 Maxes. I mean, like the whole backlog within 1 year, I think. And of course I can see the headlines like, yeah, Boeing over delivered Airbus, blah blah blah, look, oh, we delivered the most aircraft this year. Yeah, right. But this is only possible if they really manage to fix all the problems on all these aircraft. If they need to adapt the systems, assuming that they finally have the right software, and then if there needs to be a third sensor, it means that half of the aircraft will need to be adapted to have a third sensor and an adaptation of the software again, testing it again. So it's more delays. So you can say, yeah, it's not grounded anymore. Yeah, it's not grounded only in the US because, yeah, it's the home base, and it's okay. We just we're friends, so let's just, yeah. But if they're building it with 3 sensors, then most probably they will just start to build all the aircraft with 3 sensors, and then the US airlines will be like, hey, we also want that. I mean, if it is now standard, then we want to be that safe too. So this discussion is not ended. It doesn't stop here. Much more can come. But the ramp up of production, we may see that Airbus will expand their facilities in the US again. So they have A321s they're building there. They have A220s, but they may add to that to have another production line for the A320 family. I don't know which one, probably the 21, because there are a lot being sold in the US, but it could also just be the A320, I don't know. And I expect them to also expand in China. Because simply it's going to be cheaper to expand in China than to expand in Europe, unless the governments facilitate in a way with subsidies, with tax discounts, and of course Boeing will start to scream then, but Boeing has been taking tax cuts for decades now, and it's called tax cuts. So it's not, no, these are not subsidies. Well, it's just the same, just with a different name, just another label. But I expect Airbus will do that, and if Airbus adds 2 or maybe 3 production lines, Boeing may not get its 1,000 orders back. Because if Airbus can start to pump out 80 or even 90 A320 family aircraft a month, then they're going to be delivering so fast that companies will say, okay, we'll order the Airbus instead of ordering a Boeing, because in the end we'll get it at the same time or maybe even earlier. But this is speculation, yet it can be fun sometimes to look at what are the possibilities. And it's a chess game, to be honest. So when one decides to do one thing, the other can decide to do something as well, to also change strategy to react to it. But we'll see some major changes, that I can guarantee. I'm not just talking about cutting down and kicking out people and firing people or whatever. No, I'm talking about really a change in the market, change in the production, change in the designs. So I'm really curious to see what's going to happen. But we are more likely to see more A350-900s and a A350-800 who was never built ish type flying around instead of A350-1000 and A380. So if Boeing is going to sell 787s, it will most likely be the 8 variant instead of the 9 variant. And then the new NMA they're going to produce. So this was it for today. It's already the 1st of August, at least here in Europe. By the time I finish editing and uploading, it will be the 1st of Europe in the US as well. So this will cover most of the news of July. And I was really not in the mood to record a video just to say, like, oh, there was a cancellation here, oh, there was a cancellation there, or like, oh, they retired some aircraft, because that's boring. I prefer to talk about serious stuff, interesting stuff. I mean, what I consider to be interesting. Hey, it's my channel, so I decide. If you have a specific subject that you would like me to do a video about, please let me know in the comments. I actually saw that Highfly was the one who was having the A380 converted to freighter. Of course, it's the temporary conversion, but I could do an in-depth video on the why and the how and the figures, because I already did some research where I compared the 747 converted freighter to the 747 freighter, because I saw quite some differences there. Because yeah, if you take a passenger aircraft, they're built completely differently, and when you convert, you don't get a real freighter, you still get the converted one. And that's why you see it also in the registration, that it's not the real freighter, because they have certain limitations. And the same is going to happen to the A380, and I would love to see some A380s being converted to freighter versions, and it's very doable, it's very possible, but there needs to be a market for it. And there could be, I mean, if the online shopping keeps growing, UPS may decide to order them again, and this time it may be much cheaper for them, because yes, they may carry less weight, but anyway, UPS is not transporting only such heavy stuff. Mainly they're transporting light packages, like relatively big volume, relatively low weight, and a FedEx the same, and DHL also has a lot of these. So there is a real chance that it may be economical for them to buy a second-hand A380 and have it converted so that it has these big cargo doors, so they can have these special round cargo containers that can be pre-filled on the ground, and then when the aircraft arrives, they just lift these containers up and they fill up the aircraft with these containers, and then they will have huge volume, because the A380 has a much bigger volume, 20 or 30% more volume than the biggest Boeing freighter, than the 747-8 freighter or the 777 freighter, which is the 200 version. So I see a possibility there. I mean, if these aircraft are just standing there and they want to get rid of them, they will sell them off cheap. So we'll see what happens. Maybe Hi-Fly will really move into the cargo, into the freight market. I mean, adapted freight market with the lightweight stuff. We don't know. But those are interesting developments that can come. So if you want me to do research and make a video on something like this, ask and I'll take the time. For now, I wish you a beautiful weekend and a beautiful summer if you're on this side of the equator. Otherwise, a beautiful winter. If you disliked the video, you do this. If you liked it, thumbs up, share and subscribe. Also, check out my Patreon page. There you can support me and get access to exclusive content. Get more. Check it out in the link below.